Battle Through the Heavens. Chapter 231. A Successful Breakthrough and the Flame Mantra Evolution. The storm's vibration through the stone settles into a suffocating stillness that weighs heavy on the youth's chest. Deep within that hollow, a tethered spirit drifts through a blackness so thick it swallows the rhythm of a heartbeat. A sharp flicker of emerald light cuts the gloom, unfolding into a searing bloom that forces the crushing dark to finally break.
Inside the consciousness space, there was a patch of darkness, and a muddled spirit slowly drifted. Here, the internal environment was pitch black, and there seemed to be no concept of time. The spirit drifted and floated like a lonely soul with no home to return to, which was quite desolate. At one moment, in the dark space, a quite dazzling green-colored flame suddenly flickered into existence. The green flame emitted light, completely driving away the surrounding pitch blackness. The flame wriggled slightly, and after a moment, it transformed into a green lotus flower. After the green lotus flower took shape, the dark space suddenly dissipated. In an instant, it reached that muddled spirit, and a gentle light radiated, wrapping the spirit within. After wrapping the spirit, the green lotus flower suddenly began to invade rapidly, quickly pushing back the darkness. After a long while, many spots of white light appeared at the end of the dark region. The green lotus flower carried the blurred spirit, escaping all the way from the boundless consciousness space. Xiaoyan's eyes were tightly shut as he leaned against a tree trunk. His face was somewhat pale, but it seemed to be quickly recovering its rosy hue. To the side, Yao Lao was still closely watching over Xiaoyan. Seeing him change like this, he immediately breathed a sigh of relief. After a while, Xiaoyan's eyes twitched slightly, and finally, he slowly struggled to open them. At that moment, the dazzling sunlight in the sky made him slightly squint his eyes.
"Are you awake?"
A faint, aged laugh sounded by his ear. Slightly lifting his head and looking at Yao Lao, who was standing to the side smiling, Xiaoyan nodded with a smile. His hand lightly rubbed his face, and after a moment of hesitation, he asked,
Was the evolution successful?"
Haha, check it for yourself.
Yao Lao did not directly answer, but instead said with a long laugh. Nodding his head, Xiaoyan crossed his two legs, which were still slightly aching, calmed his mind, and then quickly entered a state of cultivation. His mind gradually sank into his body. At that moment, the terrifyingly complicated appearance of the meridians once again surfaced in his heart. His mind quickly passed through several meridians and then rapidly reached the location of the chi vortex in the lower abdomen. His mind swept over it, and Xiaoyan took a deep breath of imaginary air. At this moment, a feeling of excitement close to exhaustion filled every part of his body. His mind gazed at the Do Chi vortex. Not only was the volume of the Do Chi 10 times larger than before, but the Do Chi flowing within was also deep green. Clearly, the quality was also far superior compared to the previous purple fire Do Chi. Perhaps because he had completely devoured the green lotus core flame, the deep green Do Chi also contained some green-colored flames. With the flames inside, the combat strength of the green Do Chi would clearly become much more terrifying. On the Do Chi continent, the difference between cultivation techniques was determined by several points. First was the capacity for Do Chi in the Chi vortex. If two people were at the same level, but one practiced a yellow class technique while the other practiced a black class technique, then the person practicing the black class technique would naturally have a combat endurance that far exceeded the other person. Second was the difference in Do Chi quality. Under equal level conditions, if the person practicing the black class technique needed to expend one portion of Do Chi, then the person practicing the yellow class technique would have to expend 10 portions, or even more, to achieve the same result.
Third was during cultivation, which was the efficiency of absorbing natural energy to refine Dou-Qi. Similar to the above, if two people wanted to absorb the same amount of Dou-Qi energy, the person practicing the black class technique might only need 10 minutes, while the yellow class technique would need 100 minutes. Fourth was during combat. A person practicing a yellow class technique was unable to use Dou-Qi as quickly and smoothly as someone practicing a black class technique.
Summarizing these reasons, why were high-level Dou-Qi techniques considered the core focus by countless people on the Dou-Qi continent? It was extremely clear. The higher the grade of the cultivation technique, the greater the benefits it provided. Therefore, countless experts, in order to obtain high-grade techniques, could be said to follow one after another as the previous ones fell. Sometimes, even knowing it was like a moth to a flame, they were willing to be swallowed by the fire. Quietly gazing at that vortex, which was as wide as a small silver lake, Xiaoyan only gradually recovered his senses after a long while. His mind moved slightly, and a wisp of green Dou-Qi immediately flowed out from inside the vortex, then quickly skimmed along the meridians. Starting with the flow of Dou-Qi, Xiaoyan could clearly feel the powerful strength in his body, reaching a level he had never attained before. His mind closely watched the flow route of the Dou-Qi. Xiaoyan discovered that the technique route after evolution was clearly much more complicated than before. However, what was slightly strange was that although the route had become complicated, the time needed for the technique to complete one cycle was getting shorter and shorter. Moreover, after the cycle was completed, the powerful force was already waiting in his body for instructions, ready for the master to use at any time, then fiercely surging and striking out.
Did it really succeed?
Feeling the sensation of overwhelming strength in his body, Xiaoyan took a deep breath, still feeling somewhat unable to believe it. He slowly opened his eyes and looked up at Yao Lao, who was standing to the side with a gentle smile. His mouth opened slightly as he muttered.
Success?
Seeing Xiaoyan's somewhat amusing expression, Yao Lao nodded with a smile and let out a sigh of admiration. His hand lightly patted Xiaoyan's shoulder as he laughed and said,
Congratulations! You have successfully and clearly illuminated this flame mantra. It really can devour heavenly flames. In other words, its potential can be said to be infinite, and at the same time, your potential is also infinite.
Yao Lao's words echoed in his ears, and Xiaoyan felt a bit lightheaded from this unexpected happiness. His whole body leaned powerlessly against the tree trunk, and the wild joy on his face was hard to hide. After a period of frantic joy, Xiaoyan finally regained his composure. He slowly stood up, his eyes half closed. After a moment, green Dou-Qi surged out from within his body. In an instant, a perfect green Dou-Qi armor formed on Xiaoyan's body. On top of the Dou-Qi armor, green flames occasionally surged. The scorching temperature burned the surrounding space into a distorted blur. When he completely summoned the Dou-Qi armor, a fierce aura violently erupted from within Xiaoyan's body. Following the eruption of the aura, the green Dou-Qi on Xiaoyan's body immediately shot upwards, reaching about 1 zhang into midair before it stopped rising. Slowly lifting his head, Xiaoyan looked at the green Dou-Qi tightly wrapping his body and smiled faintly. His fist suddenly clenched, and then he fiercely aimed at the huge tree behind him. Thump! A dull sound followed Xiaoyan's arm, traveling unhindered into the tree trunk. The arm shook slightly, and a faint surge of force was released. Suddenly, only the sound of cracking could be heard, as countless tiny cracks quickly spread across the tree trunk. Just an instant later, the cracks widened, and the massive tree trunk unexpectedly collapsed with a boom, shattering apart. Bang! Tilting his head, he glanced at the large tree not far away, and Xiaoyan let out a light laugh. He once again closed his eyes to feel the Dou Qi inside his body, the flow speed, and the efficiency of Dou Qi production. After a moment, his eyes opened wide, and he looked at Yao Lao. Taking a deep breath of air, a brilliant smile appeared on his face.
Black class, middle level.
What Xiaoyan meant by black class middle level was naturally the grade the flame mantra had evolved to after devouring the green lotus core flame. By calculation, it seemed to have evolved from yellow class middle level to black class middle level. This time, it had evolved by almost an entire class.
Hearing Xiaoyan's words, Yao Lao nodded in relief. A large stone in his heart slowly fell, and at the same time, the knots in his heart completely relaxed. He smiled and praised.
Not bad, as expected of the green lotus core flame. Although evolving the technique grade requires an extremely massive amount of energy. For a heavenly flame, it seems it wasn't too difficult to achieve.
Letting out a long breath, the Dou Qi flames on Xiaoyan's body gradually retracted into his body. He lightly clenched his fist and said with a smile,
Teacher, it seems your previous worries were unnecessary.
If it weren't for the assistance of the seven-colored heaven-swallowing python yesterday, I don't think you could have successfully resisted the backlash of the heavenly flame.
Looking at Xiaoyan's smugness, Yao Lao rolled his eyes and curled his lips. Recalling the intense pain caused by devouring the heavenly flame, Xiaoyan gave a forced laugh. His face stiffened for a moment, and his rosy complexion once again turned slightly pale. Swallowing a mouthful of saliva, he smiled bitterly and nodded, still feeling some fear. He sighed and said,
That kind of pain is truly terrifying. If the heavenly flame's backlash had succeeded at that time, I'm afraid even my soul would have been burned into a void.
This flame mantra is indeed a bit strange. I really don't know what kind of madman created it. Back then, I and others went through untold hardships to find this thing in that place of death.
Speaking to this point, Yao Lao suddenly shut his mouth and stopped talking, clearly having some misgivings. Not minding Yao Lao's stop, Xiaoyan lightly shrugged his shoulders. His hand reached into his sleeve and brought out the curled body of the heaven-swallowing python. At this time, it seemed to have fallen into a deep sleep because it had devoured some of the green lotus core flame. A faint green light lingered around its body, looking somewhat strange.
The seven-colored heaven-swallowing python has several stages: infancy, growth, maturity, and peak. Every stage of evolution requires an extremely massive amount of energy. Previously, it was in the infancy stage. Perhaps because of the green lotus core flame, it is now using this massive energy to undergo a transformation.
Yao Lao stared at the small seven-colored snake and said with a smile,
After it transforms, what level will it finally reach?
Hearing this, Xiaoyan asked with some curiosity,
Perhaps it will reach the Do Wong level.
Yao Lao smiled and said,
Wait until it enters the peak stage. Even a Dozong expert wouldn't dare to underestimate it.
As expected of a spiritual object of heaven and earth, it really makes people envious.
Xiaoyan clicked his tongue in awe and exclaimed,
Ha ha! This kind of creature is very rare. Perhaps the seven-colored heaven-swallowing python in your hand is currently the only one on the Dou Qi continent.
Yao Lao laughed.
If that's really the case, then that's naturally good.
Grinning, Xiaoyan carefully put the seven-colored heaven-swallowing python back into his sleeve. He looked at the cliff in front of him, his eyes staring at the drifting clouds in the sky. He lazily rotated his neck and remained silent for a while, before saying softly,
Teacher, how much time is left until that 3-year agreement?
2 months.
Yao Lao said indifferently.
2 months, huh?
With a light laugh, Xiaoyan's finger flicked inside the storage ring. The massive, heavy Xuan ruler once again appeared. His hand tightly gripped the ruler's handle and suddenly swung it down fiercely. A huge rock under his feet immediately shattered into pieces.
Nalanya Ran, in these final 2 months, I hope you have prepared well.
In the distant mountain forest, a flying eagle struggled to flap its wings atop a treetop. A sharp eagle cry echoed out, and it suddenly flapped its wings and took flight.